All right. I remember our first winter in our first house. The furnace kept doing this thing where after you would adjust the thermostat, it would blow hot air for a few minutes and then it would just start blowing cold air. It didn't do it all the time, just sometimes. So, and now this was before I knew anything about HVAC. So I just kind of counted myself lucky that the thing would come back on and start blowing hot air again after I let it sit and shut it down for a while. I would come to find out later that the thing was overheating. I didn't even realize that was something that your furnace could do.
It's definitely something your furnace can do.
And that's what we're going to be talking about on this episode of In the House. Let's go. In the House is an Any Hour Services podcast where we talk about things homeowners should know when it comes to maintaining and repairing their homes. I'm Mike Wilson, and I'm joined today by Richard Bunker. He's the manager of the HVAC service and tune-up departments at Any Hour Services. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I need to make sure my phone's on silent. Okay.
Mine's on silent all the time. So.
Yeah. Mine's not, because when I put it on silent, and it's in my pocket or it's sitting on a desk, sometimes I don't hear it or notice it's vibrating, and people get mad when I don't answer. So anyway, okay, so my experience that I shared with my furnace is this unique to me, or is...
No, we definitely have this. It happens more often than we realize. Okay. So, and like you said that perfect example. Like, what happens is your furnace will turn on and heat, and then the furnace will overheat, and then it cools off and it blows cold air, and then it resets the cycle. Rather than heating your home, getting to the temperature, and then turning off, it just sits there and overheats, cools down, overheats, cools down.
So why is this so common?
Just a lot of things for ductwork. Dirty filters is a large problem. That's probably the most common thing that we see, is the filter hasn't been changed in a long time. It's just something that's out of sight, out of mind.
Gotcha.
So was yours a dirty filter, Mike?
It wasn't. Mine happened to be... and this is why I said I would find out later that the thing was overheating. When we moved into our house, it had a furnace, but no air conditioner. It had like a swamp cooler in the front room. And so we made it through our first winter. We bought the thing in October. So we weren't super worried about the heat because the swamp cooler in the front room, got the job done. But when we came back around to our first summer, swamp cooler wasn't cutting it. And so we decided to get an air conditioner. And at the time, the furnace was really old. But when the company came through, and this was before Any Hour was offering, HVAC. And so when the company came through and went through and did their thing, they came upstairs and they were like, hey, do you have the issue where your thing would run and then it would blow cold air and whatever? And I thought they were prophets. I was like, oh my gosh, I have got the right people at my house. How did they know? I didn't tell them this. But I was like, yeah. And they were like, well, your furnace is oversized. And what they told me was the old furnace that came with the house was 120 BTUs. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. It was 120 BTUs. And when they sized it, the house only needed 80. And so that was what was going on, is the thing and it wasn't multi-stage. It was like an old furnace. So it would come on and it would just blow full blast, and the thing would overheat, trip the high limit switch or whatever. And so that's what was going on with mine.
Depending on how old your other furnace was, there's there's several different kind of limit switches. Some of the older furnaces, they have a metal, kind of like a spiral thing. Mm-hmm. And as it expands and contracts, it kind of makes a connection. And some of those, once they've been, for years and years of use, they get uncalibrated. They're not as accurate. So the same thing will happen. It may not necessarily be overheating, but it more than likely is.
Gotcha.
But it can just turn that fan off on. Typically, when we see that happen, though, what happens is it gets up your house to temperature and then turns off, and then randomly the blower will turn on. That's something different than just overheating.
Gotcha. Yeah. So with ours, since it would come on and blow hot air, but then it would go off pretty quick. Looking back, I assume it was.
Yeah. No, it was definitely where it turned back on. Yeah. You're overheating.
So you mentioned ductwork and dirty filters are the most common, or I guess. Filters being the most common. What do you mean when you say the ductwork can be a cause of that?
So on the side or the bottom of the furnace, depending on the installation, you're only allowed to cut so much of an opening, and different size of furnaces need different openings. The larger furnaces, 120,000 BTU like you had, it needs a bigger opening, possibly 2 openings. And so that's one of the things we see is when it gets installed, they don't cut the full opening. They just cut a little hole and throw a filter in and call it a day, where that's a big restriction right there. So that's one of the things I mean by the ductwork is the actual opening for the furnace isn't big enough.
Gotcha.
So, and then on top of that, the ductwork in your house, it may be undersized. So if you've got a 120,000 BTU furnace like you have, but the ductwork's only sized for, let's say, a 80 or a 90, that it's just going to overheat. It's like a straw blowing through a straw, and you pinch that off a little bit. You're not allowed to, move that air. It's going to overheat.
Right. And that's something that's interesting, because there's like two sides of the equation, right? There's like how much square footage or cubic footage you have in your home, and how many BTUs it actually takes to heat it. But then there's the process of delivering the air and bringing the air back. And so a lot of people don't realize that has to be sized properly to be able to move that air back and forth. And the way I like to explain it to people is that, in that little furnace cabinet down in the basement, it is creating all of the heat that you need to heat your entire home. Or if you got two, whatever. But if it's like in my house, it's a smaller house. So I've got one furnace, and it creates all the heat I need for that entire house. But the only way that it can like get that heat out of that little metal box is if the airflow is working properly. So it's got to be able to move a certain amount out and move a certain amount back in order for it to, because all that heat on the heat exchanger, if you don't cool that off, if you don't move that heat throughout the house, then you end up with that situation where, on a good day, it just shuts the furnace down. On a bad day, it's been happening over and over and over again, and it causes damage to the system.
Yeah, it definitely can cause some major damages. And on top of that, you were fortunate enough to where it would turn on back on a little bit. Okay?
Right.
Now, a lot of furnaces, they'll actually go into lockout mode. And they may not ever, they'll come out, but that switch may never reset. And then they don't have heat at all.
Gotcha.
So that's definitely important there. But I really like the phrase that you use and how to explain how we heat homes. Come on, Mike, you got to say it.
So we pipe natural gas into a little metal box in the basement, and we light it on fire. and the only way we can get that heat is through blowing some fans on it and hope that it like goes through the house.
I love your explanation of that.
I don't remember when it like hit me like that, but I loved the way that it sounded saying that. So I'd never heard it said like that before. So hopefully, if anyone's listening and you've heard it explained like that before, like let me know. But if not, don't steal it.
I should try go to the house some days. Somebody's like cold and like, I just want to get our heat. I'm like, sure, I'll just go ahead and pipe natural gas to a box and we'll light it on fire. Just see the reaction.
There you go. Well, I think what made me think about it was I was thinking about the way that like we used to heat like a log cabin is with a fireplace, right? And you like, and that heat radiates, and it's like, well, we still kind of light a fire in the basement, and the heat radiates through the house. It's just we have some fans to help move it, and
there's a few more safety features now.
Oh yeah, for sure, right. The safety feature before was, hopefully you stay awake and see that the house isn't on fire.
Yeah, is there smoke?
Right. So, okay, so in my situation where the furnace, so I guess, the episode today is we're talking about signs that your furnace is overheating.
So the number one, like you said, if your furnace turns on, it heats the house, and it turns off before the house gets the temperature, and it turns back on, that's a good sign that, hey, your furnace is overheating.
So tell me if I'm thinking about this right, because I kind of look at as two different things. There's the one where it shuts the furnace off completely, and then it comes back on and shuts off. That's short cycling, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll come on. So you go to the thermostat, you call for warmer temperature than it is right now.
72 degrees, whatever it is.
Right. Furnace comes on, but before it actually reaches 72 degrees, it shuts off, and then it comes on again. And so it's almost like a little stair step.
Yes.
And that's because the furnace is overheating.
Yes.
Right?
Most likely.
Most likely.
Yes.
But then the other one, like with me, it would come on, and the burners would stop, but the fan was still going. And is that still considered a short cycle?
Not if it doesn't reset and do it again. If it's just staying running, your fan's running without the flames, then no, that's not a short cycle.
Okay, but it is a situation, or it is a sign that your system's overheating.
Yeah.
And the reason that fan keeps going, how come the fan keeps going in that situation?
It's kind of a safety feature.
Okay.
So one thing is just making sure it's clearing everything out. It's going to cool that heat exchanger down, because again, you don't want that to get hot.
Right.
It can cause fires. I've seen it. Unfortunately, it's very, very rare. So it's not something we need to be generally, afraid of. But anytime you have that fan, it's kind of like when you get sick. typically you get a cough or something like that. So it's just kind of telling you, hey, there's a problem. So if your fan's just running, and your house isn't heating, you've got a problem.
Got it. Okay, so one sign is that it comes on, but it doesn't reach temperature. Are there any other signs that your system might be overheating?
If you've got so the main one is just it gets turned on, heats up, turns off, heats up, turns off before it reaches temperature. That's going to be your main one. For other signs, I don't think you're really going to notice that other than with having a meter.
Gotcha. So is there anything that we can do when our system's overheating? Like for me, like my system was overheating. I shut the thing off. I waited for a little bit and then I turned it back on.
Yeah. Check your filter.
Okay.
Make sure the filter's clean. Like I said, we get a lot of those calls in the first of the winter because, it's heating season. It's now blocked. Check filter. Check your vents on your floor or your ceiling, wherever they're at. Make sure they're open. If you've got a new couch or a new bookshelf, entertainment, make sure you're not blocking a return. Make sure your returns are open. Just things like that. That's probably the second step. I would make sure that everything's open because during the air conditioning season, a lot of people tend to close their vents downstairs, and now they're closed, and now that furnace is overheating because it needs those open.
Gotcha.
So I'd make sure all the vents are open.
So airflow is like the most important
Yes.
thing because, again, you've got to like move that heat throughout the house. And so, anything that restricts the airflow, whether it's a dirty filter so it can't move as much air, from the house because that's in the way. The vent's closing, it can't move as much out. If you're blocking the returns, it can't move as much. So that's good advice. So go shut it off, make sure you got a clean filter, go around, open the vents, make sure the return airs aren't blocked. Any other things that
I would also look and just see if your furnace itself is dirty. If it's dirty, there's what did we come up with, a blower wheel? Is that what we finally dubbed the official name, was a blower wheel?
Well, I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? Like, I don't think we came up with that official name. I think the engineers.
Yes, we had different nicknames for it, but I think settled for blower wheel is what we're going to be calling it now. If the furnace is dirty, those blower wheels, they have a whole bunch of these little wheels that turn, not wheels, but little bars, you want to call it, that grab the air and move it. Mm-hmm. Those can get a little dirt on there, and that little
fins,
dirt.
We can call them fins.
Fins, I like it. See, you're the terminology guy, I guess.
Well, again, I don't think I came up with that.
But those get a little dirt on there, and that little dirt may not seem like a lot, but it's going to prevent air from moving. That furnace is designed to have so much air move through there. So if the furnace itself is dirty, that might be signs that, hey, it's overheating on its own because that's not clean.
Right. So what's the solution if your furnace is overheating?
Really just to make sure we got to check for airflow. That's going to be the overall solution is, hey, how much air are we actually moving and what do we need and how much is required for this furnace? And that's going to be doing some testing that we can do.
Gotcha. So it doesn't necessarily, like in my case, the thing was oversized, but if your furnace is overheating, it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be replaced.
Correct.
Okay. So there's things that we can do before that. So you said you need to check the airflow. I know Any Hour Services does something called an airflow analysis. Yes. Talk me through that. What is that?
So if you're having some issues with your house, overheating, or you've got spots in your house or hot or colder, we'll come out for free to do an airflow analysis, and we'll do a whole bunch of checking, some measurements on air and testing some things. It might be something simple as adding a cold air return. It might be just simply, we need a larger filter, a different filter. There's some great filters out there that, they'll block everything, PET, or what's the word I want to say? Pollen, all sorts of different things. But those restrict airflow a lot, and that causes problems. So it might just be something simple as that. And it could be something more, hey, we need to make some transitions and make the airflow a little smoother here. But it's not necessarily furnace.
Gotcha. So, I remember when you came and did this at my house and, checking different things and, the simplest way I can describe is that you're looking for where those restrictions are, where the choke points. Yeah. Yep. Where you're either not bringing enough air back or you're not pushing enough air out in order for the system to work the way that it was designed to. Another thing that actually could be causing, the system to overheat as far as from an airflow restriction standpoint, but it's one that homeowners can't really check easily themselves, especially if they don't know what they're doing. But if you have a dirty filter or a filter that's too big and lets too much go by, you actually, if you have an air conditioner, you kind of have another automatic filter built in above the heat exchanger, which is the evaporator coil or the A coil or whatever you want to call it. And it's got little radiator fins, and if you've got stuff going by that, there's condensation coming off of the thing. And so whenever dust and things go by, it kind of clumps up. And if you ever looked at one, it looks like, it's just been coated. And so if you check your filter and the vents are open and things like that, and the thing is still having issues, like you could call and like have an airflow analysis done, but I don't know if the companies in your area do that. If you're in the Utah market, absolutely call Any Hour Services. But I would actually say that maybe the first step is for someone to make sure that they schedule the annual maintenance on the thing, right? Because that is something that the technician's going to come out there. As part of our tune-ups, we do those. We check the airflow and things like that, right? So, but they're going to be able to remove the inspection plate or the cover or get some cameras in there to check that coil to see if it's dirty and it might be, causing issues.
We get a lot of customers that'll try to open that coil and they'll see the top of it and be like, oh, it's clean. It's the bottom side, depending on your average furnace. It's the bottom side that you got to get into, and that's going to be really tricky.
Right.
So
and the top's the easiest one because you just remove that screw and you kind of tilt it and you look down and you're like, oh yeah, that looks good.
That looks brand new. Then you look underside and it's like, oh wow, that's like a layer of lint.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But that is definitely something. If you have a high efficient furnace, down at the bottom of the blower, depending on the brand, there's also another coil that looks like that down there too. So it could be both blocked.
Gotcha.
So there's several different things, and that's why if the furnace is dirty, it's typically going to be there's some restrictions on airflow inside the furnace itself.
Gotcha. So if you're listening to this and you recognize any of those signs as far as like your system shutting off before it comes to temperature and you think that your system might be overheating, take the time. Make sure that you're scheduling a tune-up or a annual maintenance, whatever you want to call it. If you're in the Utah market, obviously Any Hour Services does this. We'd be happy to come out there. I think last time we were talking about this, Richard busted out and gave out a promotional price when
I'd probably slammed it and said like $29 or something like that.
Well, okay, I didn't know if you were going to do it again, but there it is.
What's the worst they're gonna do? Get mad at me?
No, I'm not mad at you, and I like it when we give the listeners.
I'm happy. I'm happy to get in. One of my technicians out to give you $29 tune-up.
Right.
Normally it's $99, but yeah, I'm happy to send someone out for $29.
You know what? That's a benefit of listening to the show. Like you get surprise deals. So normally we charge $99 to come out, and I hear different ranges from companies, anywhere from $99, $160, like just somewhere in that range, $100, $200 to come out and do that annual maintenance. But yeah, like right now, if you call in to Any Hour Services, and you can go to anyhourservices.com if you're in this market and get our information, but mention that Richard said you could have
put the blame on me. I like it.
Yeah, for sure. You were listening to the podcast, and Richard said that you could get that $70 off and get it done for just $29. So,
and I'll even give him a free filter.
What?
Standard size filter. I'll even throw that in.
All right. Well, there you go. Standard 1-inch filter, free with Richard's podcast special. That's awesome. So anyway, I hope you're not experiencing this, because I hope that when they installed your system that they took into account all those airflow issues. But if you need an airflow analysis, give us a call. If you need that tune-up, give us a call. We'd be happy to come out there and help you out with whatever you need. Any final thoughts on furnaces overheating?
No, I really got this lighting things on fire on my head. I got all sorts of stories, but they're definitely not approved for a podcast.
Well, maybe we'll have to hear the stories and come up with the podcast-friendly version.
Yeah, we could do that.
All those that are listening and watching, thanks so much for your attention. I hope this was helpful. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode of In the House. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, check out anyhourservices.com. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House. See ya.